I'm Lena, 34, female, and after my parents told my 7-year-old daughter that she should be grateful for their tolerance instead of presents, my own sister told me that no one wanted us here. It was the moment the ground beneath my feet, which had been crumbling for years, finally gave way. But instead of falling, I found my wings. The air in my parents' house was always thick with unspoken rules and layered with the dust of old resentments. For the last 2 years since my life imploded, my daughter Lily and I had been breathing this toxic air, trying to make ourselves as small and as quiet as possible. It was a failing endeavor. In a house where my very presence was a testament to my own failure, there was no way to be small enough. It all started with the divorce. Mark, my ex-husband, wasn't just unfaithful, he was financially ruinous. He left me with a mountain of debt and an empty bank account, a magician who had made our shared future disappear. With my freelance graphic design work barely keeping us afloat, I had no choice but to swallow my pride, pack 2 suitcases, and knock on the door of my childhood home. My mother, Alina, opened it. She didn't hug me. She just looked at me, then at 7-year-old Lily hiding behind my legs and sighed. It was the sigh of a woman who had just been handed a bill she had no intention of paying. Well, don't just stand there, she had said, her voice brittle. You're letting the cold in. My father, Richard, was no better. He watched from his armchair as I hauled our bags up to my old teenage bedroom, his expression a mixture of pity and disapproval. The message was clear. I had failed and now I was their problem. My older sister, Chloe, who lived in a sprawling suburban home with her perfect husband and 2 perfect children, made her feelings known a week later. She stopped by, her eyes sweeping over my cramped room with a look of distaste. I just don't understand how you let it get this bad, Lena, she'd said, shaking her head. You were always the flighty one. Coming from the woman whose university tuition was paid in full while I was encouraged to get a practical job right out of high school, the comment was particularly sharp. The favoritism wasn't a new phenomenon, it was the bedrock of our family dynamic. Chloe was the star, the one who did everything right. She married a successful man, produced 2 grandchildren my parents doted on, and maintained the perfect facade of a happy life. I was the afterthought, the one who was too sensitive, too artistic, too different. My choices were always questioned, my successes downplayed. I remembered one Christmas, years before my divorce, when I landed a major contract with a well-known advertising agency. I was ecstatic, calling my parents with the news. My mother's response was lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she'd said before immediately changing the subject. "Did Chloe tell you her husband just got another promotion? They're thinking of getting a boat." It was as if my achievements were inconvenient, a disruption to the established narrative where Chloe excelled and I struggled. That pattern became painfully amplified once Lily and I moved in. My daughter, my bright, sweet Lily, became an unwilling participant in their cruel hierarchy. Last year, for her 6th birthday, the disparity was laid bare. My parents gave her a small, lumpy envelope with $20 inside. Later that day, Chloe and her family came over. For no reason other than it was a Tuesday, my mother presented my nephew Max with a brand new tablet. I saw this and just thought of my handsome boy. Ashid Kud. Lily, ever observant, had looked from the shiny new tablet to her $20 bill and back again. She didn't say anything, but I saw the confusion in her eyes. I saw the question she was too polite to ask, why not me? I used the $20 and added more of my own to buy her the biggest, most colorful art set I could find, trying to patch the hole my parents had just torn in her spirit. I tried to explain that Grandma and Grandpa were just a little forgetful sometimes, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. Living there was a constant exercise in navigating emotional minefields. I paid for our groceries, contributed what I could to the bills from my meager freelance income, and did most of the cooking and cleaning. Yet I was treated like a freeloader. If I bought a slightly more expensive brand of yogurt for Lily, my mother would comment, "Must be nice to have money to throw around." Yet she would happily spend hundreds on designer clothes for Chloe's daughter, Sophie. The house was a stage, and we were all cast in our roles. My parents were the long-suffering benefactors, Chloe was the golden child, and I was the charity case. Lily, by extension, was the charity case's child, an unfortunate accessory to my failure. For 2 years I endured it. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself I was doing it for Lily, to give her a roof over her head. But with every passing day, I saw the light in her eyes dim just a little, saw her start to absorb the family narrative that she and her mother were somehow less than. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that this wasn't a shelter. It was a cage, and I had to find the key. The key, I decided, was forged in silence and secrecy. After Lily was asleep each night, I would retreat not to bed but to the faint glow of my laptop screen. The cramped desk in the corner of my old bedroom became my command center, my portal to a world beyond these suffocating walls. While the rest of the house slept, I was a warrior in the quiet dark, polishing my resume, crafting cover letters, and sending my portfolio out into the digital ether. My freelance work had been a lifeline, but it was inconsistent. I needed stability. I needed a real salary, benefits, and most importantly, a relocation package. I targeted companies in cities far away, Seattle, Austin, even a few in Boston. Each application felt like a prayer, a tiny paper boat pushed out into a vast ocean. Most of them sank without a trace, but I refused to lose hope. Lily was my silent co-conspirator. Sometimes she would wake up for a glass of water and find me hunched over the keyboard, my face illuminated by the screen. "Working on your secret project, Mommy?" she would whisper, her eyes wide with the sleepy wonder of a child who believes in magic. "I am, sweet pea," I'd reply, pulling her into a hug. "It's a very important project for our future." She didn't need to know the details. She just needed to know that I was fighting for us. Her innocent belief in my secret project was the fuel that kept me going through the rejections and the soul-crushing silence that followed most applications. The tension in the house began to ratchet up as my father's 65th birthday approached. This wasn't just any birthday, it was a landmark, and my mother, Eleanor, was determined to make it an event. Of course, her idea of an event meant that I was to be the unpaid party planner, chef, and cleaning crew, while Chloe was tasked with the far more important job of showing up and looking fabulous. "Lena, the guest bathroom needs a deep clean. Use the good towels," my mother instructed a week before the party, not even looking up from her magazine. "And I've made a list of groceries. Don't forget the scallions this time." The next day, Chloe breezed in, carrying a small, elegant box from a high-end bakery. "I brought the dessert for Dad's party," she announced with a triumphant smile. My mother rushed over, taking the box as if it were a holy relic. "Oh, Chloe, you shouldn't have. A lemon tart from La Patisserie. Richard will be thrilled." She cast a sideways glance at me as I stood at the counter, kneading dough for the homemade rolls I was planning to bake. "Lena is making rolls from scratch. Let's hope they're edible this time." The barb was a reference to a time months ago when a batch of bread didn't rise properly. It was a small failure she had clung to, a piece of evidence for her case against my general competence. I said nothing, just pushed my knuckles harder into the dough, imagining it was my mother's smug satisfaction I was pummeled. The day of the party was a blur of frantic activity. I was up at dawn, baking the cake, prepping hors d'oeuvres, and arranging flowers. By the time the first guests arrived, I had been on my feet for 10 hours. I quickly changed into a simple but clean dress, my hands still smelling faintly of garlic and onion. Chloe arrived with her family just as things were getting started. She wore a stunning silk dress that probably cost more than my entire monthly income. Her husband, Tom, clapped my father on the back, while her children, Max and Sophie, immediately ran to my parents for hugs, already chattering about the gifts they had brought. Lily, in her favorite blue dress, stood quietly by my side, a little overwhelmed by the noise and the crowd of adults. I squeezed her hand. "You okay, sweetie?" She nodded, but her eyes were already following her cousins, who were being lavished with attention by our parents. "Grandma looks so happy to see them," she observed, her voice small. "And she's happy to see you too," I lied, and the taste of ash was back. Throughout the party, the dynamic was on full display. I was the server, refilling drinks and clearing plates, while Chloe held court, regaling a circle of my parents' friends with stories about their recent trip to Italy. My father laughed loudest at her jokes. My mother would occasionally beckon me over, but only to point out an empty bowl of dip or a spill on the floor. I was a ghost in my own home, a functionary at my own family's celebration. In the middle of it all, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification I had been waiting for, a tiny spark of hope in the suffocating atmosphere of the party. I slipped way into the laundry rooms, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was an email from Aura Tech, a major software company in Seattle. The subject line read, "Update on your application for senior UX designer." My hands trembled as I opened it. It wasn't a rejection. It was an invitation. They wanted to schedule a final round of interviews via video call for the following week. I leaned against the washing machine, the cool metal a stark contrast to the heat flushing my cheeks. It wasn't an offer yet, but it was the closest I had come. It was a real, tangible possibility of escape. I took a deep, steadying breath, a genuine smile gracing my lips for the first time all day. I closed the email, put the phone back in my pocket, and smoothed down my dress. When I walked back into the living room, my father was preparing to open his gifts. My secret felt like a shield, a warm glow in my chest that made the impending family ritual feel slightly less dreadful. I didn't know then that this fragile shield was about to be tested by the full force of my family's cruelty. The living room was warm and loud, filled with the murmur of conversation and the rustle of wrapping paper. My father, Richard, sat in his favorite armchair, a throne of worn leather as a mountain of presents grew at his feet. He opened each one with performative delight, a new set of golf clubs from his friends, a bottle of expensive whiskey from Chloe's husband, a cashmere sweater from my mother. I had given him a framed collection of restored photographs from his own childhood, a project that had taken me weeks of careful digital work. "Oh," he said, holding it up. "That's interesting, thank you, Lena." He placed it on the floor beside his chair, where it was quickly obscured by a much larger, more impressive box. After his gifts were opened, my mother clapped her hands together, her face beaming. "And now, Richard and I have a little something for our wonderful grandchildren." This was the moment I had been dreading. It was a familiar part of the script, but it never hurt any less. Chloe's children, Max and Sophie, squealed with delight and rushed forward. My sister watched them with a proud, indulgent smile. Eleanor and Richard produced two large, perfectly wrapped boxes. For Max, there was the latest gaming console, the one he had been talking about for months. He whooped with joy, immediately tearing into the box. For Sophie, there was a beautiful, intricate dollhouse, a miniature Victorian mansion complete with tiny furniture. The room filled with oohs and ahs from the assembled guests. "Eleanor, you spoil them," one of my aunts chuckled. "Oh, my mother said, waving a dismissive hand, though her eyes shone with pride. "You can't put a price on their happiness." Lily sat on the floor near me, her hands clasped in her lap. She watched her cousins unbox their magnificent gifts, her expression a mixture of awe and quiet longing. She was a good girl, not prone to tantrums or demands. She had learned in our 2 years here to expect very little, but the sheer scale of the disparity this time was impossible to ignore. A brand new gaming console, a dollhouse that was a work of art. She waited, she watched as the last of the wrapping paper was torn away, as her cousins were smothered in hugs and kisses. She waited until the flurry of excitement died down, and her cousins were already lost in their new worlds, Max jabbing at buttons on his controller and Sophie arranging tiny chairs in her miniature living room. Then, in the relative quiet that followed, she stood up and walked over to my mother. Her voice was so soft I could barely hear it over the lingering chatter. "Grandma," she asked, her big brown eyes filled with a hope so pure it was heartbreaking, "is there a gift for me?" The question hung in the air. A few of the nearby guests fell silent, turning to look. The cheerful atmosphere of the party suddenly felt brittle, like a thin sheet of ice. My mother, Eleanor, looked down at her granddaughter. For a fleeting second, I thought I saw a flicker of something, shame, perhaps, but it was gone in an instant, replaced by a cold, hard defensiveness. She forced a tight, unpleasant smile. "A gift," she repeated, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. She then let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. "My dear Lily, you and your mother live in our house rent-free. We feed you, we put a roof over your head, we tolerate you." She leaned down, her face close to Lily's. "You should be crying with happiness that you even have this. What more could you possibly want?" The cruelty of the words delivered so publicly was stunning. It was like a physical blow. The room went utterly silent. I could feel the shocked, pitying stares of our relatives. Lily's face crumpled. Her lower lip began to tremble, and her eyes, which had been so full of hope moments before, filled with tears. She didn't understand the complex bitterness behind the words, but she understood the tone. She understood rejection. She didn't cry out, she just made a small, wounded sound in the back of her throat and ran to me, burying her face in my dress, her small body shaking with sobs. I wrapped my arms around her, pulling her tight against me, my own heart shattering into a million pieces. I glared at my mother, a fire igniting in my chest, a rage so hot and fierce it burned away the last vestiges of my deference. This was no longer about me, this was about my child, and for her I would burn this whole charade to the ground. Holding my sobbing daughter, I felt a switch flip inside me. The part of me that had spent 2 years biting my tongue, swallowing insults, and trying to keep the peace simply vanished. All that was left was a mother lioness, raw and furious. I looked directly at Alina, my voice low and shaking with rage. She is 7 years old, I said, my words slicing through the thick, uncomfortable silence. She is a child who just watched her cousins get showered with expensive presents. She doesn't understand your bitter resentment. She just knows she was left out. She's a kid. She should get some gifts too. My mother's face hardened, her feigned sweetness curdling into pure venom. The pretense for the guests was over. This was the real Alina. A gift, she screeched, her voice rising. She should be on her knees thanking us. You should be grateful you have a space to live in. We took you in when you had nothing, and this is the thanks we get? Constant demands? Why do we have to deal with such worthless people? The word worthless landed in the quiet room like a stone. It was aimed at me, but it splashed onto Lily, who flinched in my arms. The guests stared, frozen in their seats, horrified witnesses to a family's ugly unraveling. My sister, Chloe, who had been watching from the sidelines with a look of irritation, finally decided to intervene, not to defend me but to attack. She let out a contemptuous snort. "Oh, here we go again," she said, rolling her eyes. "Look, Lena, you are stressing everyone out with your constant whining. Can't you just be quiet for once? Why do you have to try and make everything about you? Look around, no one wants you here." Her words were a chorus of every insecurity I'd ever had, sung out loud for everyone to hear. "No one wants you here." I looked around the room. None of the guests met my eyes. They looked at the floor, at the ceiling, at their hands. Their silence was a form of agreement. Then my father, Richard, who had been silent in his throne-like chair, delivered the final, devastating blow. He adjusted himself, looking not at me, but at some point on the wall behind me, as if he were delivering a philosophical judgment. "Some children," he said, his voice calm and detached, "just don't deserve the same treatment." And that was it. That was the line that severed the last thread. It wasn't just about favoritism anymore. It was a statement of worth. In their eyes, my child, my innocent Lily, was fundamentally undeserving. I felt a strange calm settle over me. The rage didn't disappear, but it crystallized into something cold, hard, and clear. There was nothing left to say, nothing left to fight for in this room. You can't reason with people who have already declared your child unworthy. Without another word, I picked Lily up. Her face was still buried in my shoulder, her tears soaking the fabric of my dress. I turned my back on all of them, on my sneering sister, my venomous mother, and my cold-hearted father, and walked out of the living room. I carried her upstairs to our room, the one that had felt like a prison for 2 years. I sat on the edge of the bed, rocking her gently, murmuring soft, comforting words. "It's okay, my love, it's okay. Mommy's got you. None of that was about you. It was about them. They're the ones with the problem, not you." I stayed with her until her sobs subsided into hiccuping breaths. I set up my laptop on the bed and put on her favorite animated movie, a colorful, cheerful world so far removed from the ugliness downstairs. I tucked her in, kissed her forehead, and promised her a big bowl of ice cream just for us. As she settled in, mesmerized by the cartoon characters on the screen, I stood up. The cold resolve in my chest had solidified into a plan. The fight wasn't over. I had just been fighting on the wrong battlefield. The war wouldn't be won with words in that living room. It would be one with action, with independence, with walking away and never looking back. I walked over to the closet and pulled out my handbag. Inside, nestled among the clutter, was a plain white envelope. It had arrived in the mail yesterday. It was the result of my final round of interviews, the one I had done in secret from the library a few days ago, the secret project Lily believed in. I took the letter out of the envelope, my hands perfectly steady. Then I too Arned and walked back downstairs to face my family one last time. When I re-entered the living room, the party was effectively over. The guests were making hurried, awkward excuses, eager to escape the suffocating atmosphere of our family's poison. My parents were trying to salvage the situation, forcing smiles and assuring everyone that it was just a small family misunderstanding. Chloe stood by, looking annoyed that my drama had ruined her father's party. They all stopped when they saw me. Their expressions shifted. They expected more tears, more shouting, perhaps a pathetic apology. My mother squared her shoulders, ready for another fight. My father looked at me with weary disdain. I said nothing. I walked past them, my footsteps unnaturally loud in the tense silence. I went to the coffee table in the center of the room, the surface still littered with discarded wrapping paper and empty glasses. With a quiet, deliberate movement, I placed the single sheet of paper from my handbag onto the dark wood. The contrast was stark, one clean white sheet against the chaos of the party's remnants. My father frowned. "What is this?" I finally looked at them, my expression calm, unreadable. The rage was still there, but it was a controlled burn now, fueling my resolve. "That's okay," I said, my voice even and clear. "I don't need you to buy gifts for my daughter. I don't need anything from any of you anymore." I gestured to the paper on the table. "Look what I got myself." The room fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was laced with confusion and a dawning sense of unease. They had been expecting a confrontation on their terms within the familiar script of my dependence and their power. I had just handed them a new page, one they had never seen before. My father stared at the paper as if it might bite him. My mother squinted at it from across the room. It was Chloe, ever the nosy one, who broke the spell. She stepped forward with a huff of impatience, snatched the letter from the table, and began to read it. I watched her face. It was a fascinating, slow-motion ballet of emotion. First, there was smug curiosity. Then her eyebrows furrowed in confusion, her eyes widened slightly in disbelief, her mouth fell open. The smugness evaporated, replaced by a look of stunning, unadulterated shock. "No," she whispered, shaking her head, "no way." "What is it?" Alina demanded, her voice sharp with anxiety. "Chloe, what does it say?" Chloe didn't answer her. She looked up from the paper, her eyes locked on me. The derision was gone, replaced with something I had never seen from her before, a flicker of raw envy. She read from the letter, her voice a reedy, incredulous whisper. "Oratek, dear Lena, following your final interview, we are delighted to offer you the full-time position of senior UX designer." My father sat up straighter in his chair. My mother took an involuntary step forward. Chloe continued, her voice gaining a hysterical edge as she scanned down the page. "An annual salary of $140,000, a signing bonus of $15,000 payable on your first day, and a comprehensive relocation package to Seattle, Washington, covering all moving expenses and 3 months of temporary corporate housing." She let the paper drop from her hand. It fluttered to the carpet. $140,000, a signing bonus, a relocation package. Seattle. The words hung in the air, dismantling my family's entire reality. The foundation of their power over me, my financial struggles, my dependence on their generosity, had not just cracked, it had been obliterated by a single sheet of paper. The worthless person, the charity case, who couldn't even be trusted to buy the right kind of scallions, had just landed a six-figure job at a major tech company on the other side of the country. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of their world tilting on its axis. It was the sound of my freedom. In the deafening silence, my father was the first to find his voice, though it was weak and uncertain. Seattle, he stammered, as if the city itself were the most unbelievable part of the news. My mother, Eleanor, stared at me, her face a pale mask of shock. The cruelty from moments before was gone, replaced by a frantic, calculating look. The gears were turning in her head as she tried to reframe the narrative, to somehow absorb this new reality into her worldview without admitting defeat. Well, she said, her voice strained as she forced a wobbly smile. Why on earth didn't you tell us you were applying for such jobs, Lena? We could have helped you prepare. Your father knows people in the tech industry. It was such a blatant, desperate attempt to reclaim control that I almost laughed. Helped me? I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. You think you would have helped me? Or would you have told me I wasn't qualified, that I was aiming too high, that I should be more realistic? I looked from her to my father, then to my sister. I didn't tell you because I knew you wouldn't support me. You've never supported me. My success doesn't fit into the story you've all written for me, the one where I'm the family failure you have to tolerate. Chloe, who had been staring at the letter on the floor, finally looked up, her face flushed with a new emotion, anger. So you've been lying to us, sneaking around behind our backs this whole time. It wasn't lying, Chloe, I said calmly. It was self-preservation. I was building a lifeboat. You just proved to me beyond any doubt why I needed to. I bent down and picked up the letter, folding it carefully and placing it back in my handbag. It felt like a precious artifact, a declaration of independence. Lily and I will be leaving by the end of the week, I announced to the room. The relocation company will be in touch to arrange the shipping of our things. The finality of my statement seemed to finally break through their shock. My mother's eyes welled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness for my departure. They were tears of rage and thwarted control. You can't just leave, she cried out. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us, by abandoning your family. Repay you? I asked, a genuine, bewildered laugh escaping my lips this time. I've been your unpaid maid, cook, and errand runner for 2 years. I've paid for my own food and contributed to bills. But more than that, I have paid with my self-respect. My daughter has paid with her tears. We're settled up. The debt is cleared. I turned to leave the room. I had nothing more to say to them. You'll fail, Chloe spat at my back. You'll be back in 6 months with your tail between your legs once you realize you can't handle it on your own. I stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. Don't hold your breath, I said softly, and then I walked up the stairs to my daughter, leaving them behind in the ruins of their own making. The next few days were the strangest I had ever spent in that house. The air, once thick with tension, was now thin and empty. They avoided me. The house was silent, the usual stream of criticisms and backhanded comments having dried up completely. They moved around me like ghosts, their faces sullen and resentful. They couldn't attack me anymore, they had lost their leverage. But they couldn't bring themselves to be kind either. The packing was a joyous, liberating ritual. With every box I taped shut, I felt lighter. I was not just packing up clothes and books, I was sealing away the hurt, the resentment, the feeling of being small and unwanted. Lily, sensing the shift in mood, was a bundle of excited energy. Are we really moving to a new house, Mommy? She asked, her eyes shining. A house just for us. Yes, my love, I said, kissing the top of her head. Just for us, with a big room for all your art supplies. On the last day, the moving truck was parked in the driveway. As the professional movers loaded our few boxes, my family watched from the living room window. When it was time to go, I took Lily by the hand and walked to the front door. My mother, father, and sister stood in the hallway, a silent, grim-faced tribunal. There were no hugs, no well wishes. Eleanor spoke first, her voice cold. I hope you know what you're doing. I do, I replied simply. My father just nodded curtly, unable to look me in the eye. Chloe, ever venomous, had the last word. Don't come crawling back. I looked at the three of them, the people who were supposed to be my family, my safety net, and I felt nothing but a profound sense of pity. Their world was so small, their happiness so dependent on the perceived failure of others. Goodbye, I said. It wasn't sad, it was just a statement of fact. I walked out the front door with Lily and I did not look back. As we got into the taxi that would take us to the airport to our new life, Lily turned to me and said, "Mommy, are you happy?" I looked at her, my beautiful, resilient daughter, her face full of hope. And for the first time in years, the answer was easy. "Yes, Lily," I said, a real unburdened smile spreading across my face. "I'm very, very happy." 3 months later, the memory of my father's house felt like a scene from someone else's life. Our new apartment in Seattle was filled with light, even on the city's notoriously gray days. It was a cozy two-bedroom place with a small balcony that overlooked a park. From our living room window, we could see the Space Needle. To Lily, it was a castle in the sky. To me, it was a constant reminder of how far we had come. The apartment was filled with our things, but more importantly, it was filled with peace. The air wasn't heavy with judgment. It was filled with the scent of the vanilla candles I loved to burn and the sound of Lily's laughter. We could be loud, we could be messy, we could be ourselves. My job at Oratech was challenging and fulfilling in ways my freelance work had never been. I was part of a team, my ideas were valued, and my contributions were recognized. The signing bonus had been a godsend, allowing me to furnish our new home and enroll Lily in a wonderful school just a few blocks away. For the first time since my divorce, I had savings. I had a safety net that I had woven myself. Lily was thriving. She made new friends quickly and fell in love with her art teacher, a kind woman who praised her colorful drawings and hung them all over the classroom. The quiet, hesitant child who had been afraid to ask for anything was blossoming into a confident, happy little girl. The wounds my family had inflicted were healing, replaced by the simple joy of being loved unconditionally. One Saturday afternoon, we were sitting on the floor of our living room, working on a giant puzzle together. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it had my old area code. Curiosity got the better of me, and I answered. "Elena." It was my mother. Her voice was thin, tentative, completely different from the booming, authoritative tone she used to use. I said nothing. "Elena, are you there?" she asked. "It's your mother." "I know who it is," I said, my voice neutral. There was a long pause. "Well," she began, "I was just calling to see how you are. We haven't heard from you." "I've been busy," I replied, "getting settled." "Right, of course," she said quickly. "Your father's birthday is coming up again next month. We were hoping, well, we were wondering if you and Lily might fly in for a visit." The request was so audacious, so completely devoid of self-awareness, that I was momentarily stunned. They wanted me to use my hard-earned money and precious vacation time to fly back into the very cage I had just escaped, to celebrate the man who told my daughter she was undeserving of love. "No," I said, the word was simple, clean, and absolute. "We won't be doing that." "Oh," she said, her voice faltering. "Well, Chloe's children miss Lily so much." Another lie, another manipulation. I looked over at Lily, who was carefully fitting a puzzle piece into place, humming a happy little tune. She was safe, she was happy, she was free from their toxic orbit, and I would never, ever put her back in it. "We have our own life here, Mom," I said, and for the first time I felt a sliver of pity for her. "We're happy, I have to go now, goodbye." I hung up before she could reply. I blocked the number. I looked around my sunlit apartment at my beautiful, thriving daughter, and I felt a profound sense of peace. I had not just found a new job and a new home. I had found a new life, one that I had built from the ashes of the old one. It wasn't a secret project anymore. It was real, and it was ours. So for anyone out there who feels trapped by their family, who is made to feel small or worthless, please know this: your worth is not determined by their opinion of you. You have the power to write your own story, to build your own lifeboat. It might be hard and you might have to do it in secret, but your freedom is on the other side of that fear. You deserve to be happy. Your children deserve to be happy. Don't ever let anyone convince you otherwise.